Got it. There we
So
go.
good.
Awesomeness. Hello, everybody. Are we going to wait a minute or two?
And we can give it another minute to let everybody join in. So
Yeah.
anyone that's not familiar, Rick Sergison is broker extraordinaire at EXP. He does a lot of the FinTrack training for EXP, and we love to have him on to do trainings with us. He's been a guest speaker at our team meetings before, and just a fount of knowledge.
Yeah. How
So
do I get my
we're looking
lunch?
forward to today.
How do I get my lunch today? Come on. I like the live stuff.
I'll talk to Jennifer. We'll Uber Eats.
Okay. I'm kidding. Jennifer's bought enough meals for me every time I see her. We end up at dinner. So anyway, awesome.
Right.
Okay.
So if you want to get us taken away, I will watch the waiting room here. And just, oh my gosh, there's so much new information here. And what do we need to know? What is EXP's guidelines for this? And hit us with it, Rick.
New information coming out practically every minute. They really, and we've had a lot of our agents, and they're saying, well, why are you leaving this so late? Because Rico and Oria left it so late. Like, literally, the forms officially are going to be released. There is a meeting on the 29th, which is exactly 48 hours before TRESA comes into full effect. I was actually talking to somebody at a different brokerage, and they have not done anything yet about TRESA. It's almost as if they go, well, what's that? Just to be clear, TRESA is going to be, as of December the 1st, the law under which we operate. And the key thing here, well, there's a lot of key things, but the number one thing is customers will no longer exist. They'll be living, but they just won't be customers anymore. So first and foremost, anything that is a customer stops November the 30th at 11:59 p.m. So no more customers. They are either a client in some capacity, or they are self-represented parties. And to be clear, you can't do much for a self-represented party. They are basically saying, I got this, I'm on my own. To the point that we arguably can't even do up an offer for them. Now, if they give us the details, exactly what they want, but we can't say, oh, you forgot to add this clause, or do you think you should offer a different price? We can't go anywhere with that. So keeping in mind that if they are not a client, you cannot share your service, your expertise, your opinion, or your knowledge with them. Okay? So anything that's public domain, that's fine. So in fact, let me just switch over here quickly to the questions that Sarah sent to me so we can handle those first. And then TRESA questions. Here we go. Okay, so Sarah sent me a couple specific questions. So let's talk about those first. And they may lead to other questions, and that's okay. I may not have all the answers yet, but I'll jot them down. We are working now as a team. I just got out of a meeting 10 minutes ago where we're talking about how are we going to deal with the questions between the 9 management people. And first and foremost, let me tell you what a huge, huge advantage that you guys have being with us is that we are on top of everything. There are 9, either Catherine and 8 designated or 8 managing brokers. Between the 9 of us, we've got about approximately 250 years of experience. So, and we operate as a team. We literally just went through a whole bunch of TRESA questions, said, okay, what is everybody's opinion on this? What is the best answer? So we will be publishing TRESA questions and answers. And each answer will be vetted by our entire group before we give that answer. But it'll be vetted in real time. So if you ask me a question today, I'll have it into a specific chat with the other 8 members of the Ontario management team before the end of the day, and we will have an answer back. That's how we're going to operate it. Okay. Now, new multiple representation acknowledgement form. Okay. Is this something we can have the client sign up front when they sign the rest of the listing paperwork? Absolutely not. Okay. That's the answer to that. The Act specifies that we document multiple representation as soon as it becomes apparent, but we can't do it in advance. So you're doing an offer for, somebody comes in and signs a BRA, so they're a client too. Your seller's a client. We're going to have a multiple representation at that time that you're ready to prepare that offer. Then you have to say to the seller, are you okay with this? And the buyer, are you okay with this? That's when the multiple representation form gets signed, at the time that you are now specifically working for both parties in the same transaction. So let's talk a little bit further about the next question, though, because this is where it's going to get, and you have to break it down in your mind. Okay. Designated representation. Is this an option for deals within the team? Yes, it is. Okay. Every time you take a listing now, you are going to designate members of the team who are responsible and working for that seller, but not the whole team. Okay. So you could have a list of listing seller reps that are designated, and you could have a set of buyer representatives that are designated for buyers. Okay. Now, to give you an idea, if you're not familiar with designated agency, and this is something that is 30 years overdue, okay, and is important enough that TRESA was supposed to come into play months ago. And OREA finally convinced RICO that if you're going down this path, not to look at designated agency is a huge mistake. And they finally went, yeah, okay, maybe we should look at that, and we'll delay the whole thing. And that's why it a week before it was supposed to come into play, they said, oh no, we're holding off, with no date in mind, because the only thing that changed is designated agency. It's that important. So traditionally, you had a brokerage. I going back, give you some history here, and I almost go this far back. I go back 47 years. But initially, when we had real estate in the province of Ontario, what you had was a seller hired a brokerage to sell their house. The only agency that existed at that time was seller agency. I'm hiring you to sell my house. You work for me. And we didn't have an MLS. We didn't have a board. We didn't have much of anything. What we had was individual brokerages selling real estate. And then what ended up happening was, say Jennifer and I had lunch one day, and we're talking about listings. And I say, well, I've got this great listing, but it's only a 3-bedroom, and I have a client that's looking for a 4. And Jennifer says, well, I've got a 4-bedroom. Okay, but I'm working for my seller. You're working for your seller. There's nothing else. So what happened was Jennifer said, well, you know what, Rick, bring your buyer and we'll split it. And that created sub-agency. And that went on for 50 years. And we assumed that all the agents only worked for the sellers, which was kind of naive and silly. And eventually it got tried in court. And the judge kind of said, you guys are morons, because agency is not created solely by contract or solely by remunerate. By being paid. That word is just one that's just tongue-tied for me. So that's where buyer agency started in the 1990s. They said, no, you can work for a buyer and you can work for a seller. But the second you're both in the same brokerage because the agency was at the brokerage level, that's a multiple representation. And at the time, it made sense because we used to work in open air offices with room dividers that were 6 feet high, and you could hear everything in the office. So if I'm talking to my seller and you're working with a buyer, you could hear everything I said. But today's real estate is so completely different. We all work in the same brokerage, but we work out of home, we work out of our cars. Rarely, well, certainly in EXP, rarely do we even work in an office. So this is 30 years behind schedule. And they finally said, okay, well, let's be realistic. The brokerage has a choice. Either we can keep things the way we are, which we're not doing, or we can go with designated agency. So what will happen is the brokerage, which really is the person signing the listing at this point, is going to designate who is going to deal with this client. So obviously my listings, I'm going to be the designated agent. Okay. So we'll get into the teams in just a second. Okay. But I could have somebody else say I'm going on vacation for a week. I could actually amend that with the seller's permission to add Joe Blow as designated agent as well while I'm on vacation, even if it's a limited time. So I could literally amend it and say Joe Blow is going to be covering this listing as the designated agent between December 24th and January the 4th, because I'm, going away for Christmas or whatever. So that's something that now comes into play. But here's the thing. You can do the same with seller or with buyers. Now, as a team, and this is one of the most frustrating parts of RICO, RICO does not acknowledge teams. RICO acknowledges brokerages, and RICO acknowledges individual registrants. That's it. So when we try and get a ruling about a team or something, they just wash their hands. They say, sorry, that's a bunch of individuals working for a brokerage. This is going to change up a little bit, though, because suddenly you could have a listing and have several of your team members listed as responsible for that listing, designated. You could also have buyers that are designated to certain agents. The only time then you end up in a multiple representation is if one of those agents that is designated on that listing ends up with a buyer that wants to put a buyer under contract, a client that wants to put an offer on a listing that they're already designated under. Clear as mud, right? Okay. But that's how we're going to have to work in a team environment. Now, I need to probably talk directly with Jennifer and how she wants to do certain things.
Rick, we can't hear you.
You should be able to.
Yeah, we can hear him, Ruben.
Can somebody?
Yes,
Sorry,
we
I
can
didn't hear
hear.
this way. Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here. So what you may have is the team divided on certain listings. That, hey, we're going to put these 3 agents specifically on this listing, and everybody else on the team, if you get a buyer and you sign them to a contract, then we still don't have a multiple representation. However, this is what becomes vitally important. You cannot share information between the two. It's no different than going to a broker open. We used to have them in Pickering. I don't know, you probably had them up there as well, where literally agents from different brokerages got together and shared their listing. Hey, everybody, I'm with the Jennifer Jones team and we've got this wonderful listing, blah, blah, blah. But again, in that environment, you wouldn't, unless the seller had given you permission in writing, say, listen, my seller is really desperate and we'll look at all offers because we've got a closing in 2 weeks, right? This will be no different. So in your team meetings, as much as you can promote your listings, nothing that it would be confidential from the designated agent for the listing can be shared with who could potentially be designated agents for a buyer. So keep that in mind. Not a big deal, You just don't give any duress or any reasoning behind, okay, we got to get this one moved, which normally you would on a team. I mean, I've been up to enough of your team meetings in live to know that, hey, we got to get this one sold. We can't do that outside of the people that are designated to that listing. Okay. Now there are huge advantages to this. Okay. It's way overdue. It acknowledges how we actually work. The idea that I because I work for the same brokerage would have intimate knowledge of your listings or your buyers or anything else is nonsense. So this is why it's come to this. But it's going to be a work in progress. And that's why all 9 of us management are in constant discussion, and we'll be there for you. So when you get I don't quite get it, you reach out to us. Okay. You send something to onbroker@exprealty.net, because we all get that one. And whoever can get back to you first will get back to you. Okay. So are there any questions on that?
Now, just a clarification, Rick. So on the team, we have Jennifer's name on every deal we do for stats. If Jennifer's on the listing side, her name's on there. If she's on the buy side, her name's on there. Can we still do designated representation if Jennifer's specific name is going to be on both sides, or is it always defaulting to multiple representation?
She's in multiple representation.
Okay.
Yeah. And even if you explain to the buyer that Jennifer is not actually, but we do need you to sign off on this multiple representation to allow it.
Okay, so because her name is on the deal, we can't say that she's not involved. Like, I can't, if I have a listing, I can't.
I don't see how we can.
But because her name is on there on the TREB listing, it's assumed that she's also representing.
I'm gonna double check that. Jay, both sides. There may be a way around it, and I'm not saying, oh well, let's start looking at ways around TRESA. It depends on what they deem. If she's only there for the reporting and not necessarily designated prior to that, might make a difference. That's the only thing I can think of. Otherwise, it's going to be multiple representation every time for her. Okay, but I'll clarify that, because there may be a way, and that may be calling the board, and the board says, oh no, don't be silly, the fact that she's listed as number 1. But again, that's really because of board requirements in recording to keep that data, where really she may not even ever meet that seller or ever meet that buyer.
Exactly. And that is the case in, like, for a lot of cases when I'm working my last buyer, Jennifer never met them. However, for reporting purposes, because we're on the team for protecting our stats, that's why she's on that.
Exactly. So let me see if there's an exclusion because of that. Because again, realize this is all spanking brand new, and it's going to grow and develop. And even some of the earlier meetings, they've said, well, there really are no rules. There's best practices. Well, no, there are rules, and those rules are going to get, as things come up, RICO is going to establish those precedents. And then we need to know, okay, this went in front of RICO. This is what RICO has decided will happen. Right now, and again, I was around when REBA 2002 came in. And for the first couple of months, you kind of like, okay, what do I do? How is this going to work? Over time, we don't think about it. We know how it works, but that's because it's been in practice. So we fully expect I wish they'd waited until January, because I know what's going to happen for my whole month of December, including Christmas. I'm going to have people saying, hey, Rick, I know it's Christmas Day, but. So I'll have to take off my Santa Claus suit. Actually, I'll be in Collingwood on Christmas Day being Santa to a homeless Christmas dinner. So it'll be fun. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Angelique, you had a question.
Yes, a couple of questions, again, related to the team. So what does this mean in terms of agents on the team hosting open houses on our listings? And then also, as a second to that, when agents on the team do showings for other agents.
All right. Now, again, keep in mind that we have to look at what capacity, in that if they are just showing the property, I'm just opening the door, I'm not answering any questions other than public information, then that's a service to our client, the seller. If they're just doing an open house, they could be doing exactly the same thing where they're not answering questions. They're basically just holding the house open. But let's be honest, that doesn't make much sense as an open house. So you might want to put them on designated to the listing, even if it's just for that weekend. Okay. So a buyer comes in, and if the buyer wants to put an offer in on the property, now we have a couple choices as a team. You could assign that buyer to another agent and make them the designated agent for that buyer, or you would have a multiple representation where the person doing the open house who's named on the listing is now named on the buyer. Multiple representation occur.
Got it.
And this is where Jennifer is going to have to make some choices on, okay, how do we want to operate as a team? And we're not here to tell you this is how you have to operate your team. We're giving you the framework and the parameter and say you need to make decisions on how your team is going to operate so we don't cross a line.
And with the showings, I was sort of kind of what we have in place now is if an agent were ill, for example, then another agent could step in and show their buyer's property.
Yeah.
So would that mean then that we're having to designate them to the buyer for that period of time?
If they're going to be offering opinions, if they're going to be sharing any of their expertise or whatever. We've gone from the brokerage being everything to the individual being everything. So they have to represent that buyer. So even if, oh, gee, I've got COVID, I'm going to be off for a week. Okay, I can designate you to take care of my buyers while I'm gone. And you act as their agent. Okay.
Yep.
And that's the best way to do that. And the nice thing is, now do keep in mind that if you've ever been designated for a seller or a buyer, anything that you learn in that process becomes confidential and cannot be shared just because, oh, I was designated last week, but I'm not designated anymore. So blah, 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 blah. You can't do that. Okay. You have to hold that in confidence. Same way as when you're in a multiple representation, there are certain things we cannot divulge between a buyer and seller. I never could. Can't turn and say, oh, well, I happen to know the seller will take $5,000 less, or I know the buyer would pay $5,000 more. That has to be kept confidential. You're literally negotiating on behalf of the party you're working for.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Rick.
Great. Anybody else? Sorry,
just before I jump over to Anna, I just had a quick clarification on that point, Rick. So let's say I was running an open house on Angelique's listing and she designated me just for that weekend. Yeah. And everything goes fine. And then the next week I bring a buyer. I am no longer designated, but I was at some point in the past. Is it multiple representation?
I would argue on the side of yes. I would want the seller and the buyer to know that even if it's currently not technically multiple representation, in the whole scheme of the listing, it is. And I would rather say, hey, I need you to sign off on this just to say you're okay with it. Because I would hate for the buyer to find out afterwards, hey, hold on a second. You were designated on this once upon a time. Why didn't you tell? What are you hiding? And a large part of it is just being honest. And that's the nice thing about TRESA. Really what we're doing is we're being honest and clarifying exactly what's going on. For instance, when you take a listing, what do you do now? You sign a listing that says, we are going to market your home. End of statement. Not under TRESA. Anytime you have a services agreement, which would be a listing, You are now going to itemize exactly what you are going to do. So your listing will be, we will provide a CMA for you. We will provide a sign. We will have an open house once a month. We will advertise it here. We will do this. We will do that. As opposed to, yeah, we're going to market your home. For some of you that haven't been around for a number of years, the listing form was actually not a valid contract for many, many years. We actually handed a piece of paper to the seller and said, please sign here. And we never signed it. You can't have a contract that's one way, but that's how our listing forms were forever. And then suddenly some wise person went, hey, hold on a sec. This isn't legally binding because it's really not a contract between two parties. The seller is saying yes, but nothing. And it didn't even say we would market the home. It said nothing, that the real estate, that the brokerage would do a darn thing. And it's getting more and more precise. So it's literally going to say, we are agreeing to this. So the same thing can happen with a buyer. Say that a buyer doesn't want full representation, but they want you to show them some houses. You'll be able to do a limited services agreement with the buyer outlining exactly what you will do and will not do, and how they're going to get how you're going to get compensated. So, but these are things they don't even have that form done yet. So until we see it, I can't describe it to you. You know, they will be done in the next week, and then we'll be able to say, here's the form. You can see here. So that's what we're waiting for. So know that every meeting on Wednesday, the sales meetings, Ontario sales meetings, we're dealing with TRESA. Know that Tuesday mornings, meet your broker at 9 o'clock, and everybody's welcome to pop in. There's 3 or 4 brokers on, and we're just there to answer questions, say hi, have a cup of coffee, get our day started. If we get enough response, we will extend that. Every Monday training for the foreseeable future from 11 till 1 in the Ontario auditorium, it's TRESA. We've scrapped everything else, and all we'll be talking about is different aspects of TRESA, all of those things, because it is the single most important thing that we as agents need to understand before December the 1st. Anyway, enough preaching. What else have we got?
Never enough. Anna, you had a question. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Number one, I also put it into the chat. Do we need to, let's say you're going to sign the listing agreement, right? And do we need to designate the other agents right away in the same listing agreement?
No, you can designate yourself, and then you can amend that after. You can do an amendment to the listing agreement and say, we're adding these people. Automatically, and this is what you have to decide as a team, does Jennifer Jones become designated automatically? That would make sense to me. And then you. But if there's other people, then you just add them with the seller's permission. Again, it's a two-way contract. And that's one quick thing that I'm just thinking while you're saying it. The guide that I've seen aspects of, some are 13 pages, some are 11 pages. The RICO guide that will be finalized by the 29th is a document that every single client or person, they're not clients necessarily, and any person that you talk to that wants to have a chat about real estate, they're going to have to read that. You have to explain it to them. It's not enough to say, hey, did you get that? Did you read it? Any questions? No. Okay, let's go. You cannot modify that document in any way, including putting a brand on it or anything. That probably 11-page document must be described and gone over with every single person so that they can decide for themselves what agency they want. And hopefully they will acknowledge it. There's a place that I acknowledge that I've received this and it's been explained to me. And then hopefully they'll sign it. If they don't, because let's face it, some people don't like signing anything, I would then say, in that same space, I would write, I, Rick Surgison, presented and explained this to them on November the 21st, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they refused to sign.
When does it come to necessity? Because if they come to your open house, like we mentioned, or they call on realtor.ca or call on sign, like
if they come to an open house and they don't have any real questions, or you know, they're just looking at the house, that's fine. The second they say, well, we have some questions, then you're going to have to pull that out and say, well, before I can answer them, we need to go through this. And it may be very well that you're going to start saying, listen, can we get together after the open house? Because I have, you know, I'll give you this now, but I need to go through it before I can. Now realize the public is going to get used to this very fast. They won't like it necessarily, but they're going to get used to it. They have no choice. Because any other agent in Ontario that does something different is breaking the law. And if somebody says, oh, well, I was talking to an agent, they didn't make me do that. Has it been since December the 1st? Yeah, then I'd be careful because that agent's violating the law.
how realistic it is if you have 10 visitors to the open house and they all have questions, because everybody coming to the open house.
Rico doesn't think about these things, and I'll be honest with you, they don't care. Do you know when they first brought out the working with a realtor form? They actually wanted us to have that signed prior to any discussion with a potential buyer. Okay, hold on a sec. They called me. I'm on the phone with them. You mean I've got to say, excuse me, can I fax this to you and then we can talk? And Rico found, okay, yeah, I guess that would be kind of difficult. So a lot of these things, we're going to see what happens in practice. Okay, when that happens, we're going to do the best we can. And then we're going to have to say, I did the best we could. This is obviously going to be an ongoing problem. How are we going to solve it? But we won't know until that comes in our face. We're going to have to work through some practice. I'm thrilled that it didn't happen 2-3 years ago when we were just running like absolute mad fools and the market was on fire and we had no time to do anything. So if there's a blessing in a slower market, we'll be able to put these into play and adapt them that much better.
Last question from me, at least. So you get a call from realtor.ca or from the sign, people driving by, and they ask you questions right away. What is the age? When is the roof done? What is this? And what is that? So what do we tell them then?
Is this public information? It's not. Then according to what you're providing in a service, you're providing an opinion. You can't do that unless they're a client, which is tough. You know, I can tell you what the price is because it's published. It's published information. But as far as and I guess the thing would be is it a service to your seller? That becomes there's two things here. Is it a service to your seller, number one? And does it rely on your opinion, your knowledge, your resources? Because if it does, you can't answer anything that does not work in your client's best interest. So that might be something that you even discuss with your seller ahead of time. Listen, okay, you've got a new roof. You don't mind me pointing that out. It would be in your benefit. Okay, yeah. Oh, the roof's 25 years old and, you know, it needs to be done. I don't want you disclosing that, to buyers. It's going to get a lot more exact as to what we do and what we can in our discussions with both buyers and sellers. But people are saying, oh, that's great. They'll just go somewhere else. They can't go anywhere else. And this is how things are going to develop. The only thing we can do is adapt. And as I said before, and people think evolution goes to the strongest and the fastest. It doesn't. Evolution goes to the most adaptable. And the faster we adapt, the more we understand what this is, the better we will be and the more business we will do because people will know They know what they're talking about. So anyway, again, I'll get down off my soapbox here a bit.
We love all this extra information, but to clarify, if it's public information, if I had like a feature sheet attached to the listing that had the age of the roof and all like approximate utility costs, I can talk about that because it's now public information.
Public information.
Okay.
They can get that from somewhere else. They're not relying on you for your opinion, your expertise, and your service.
Amazing.
So you could say, hey, I'll send you the fact sheet on it. It's
Okay.
public. Yeah. Got a couple more
and
questions there.
You have a question?
I do. Yeah, thanks. So I think the biggest curve is going to be the consumer learning curve, because we may come off as pushy and overbearing and salesy, right? Getting people to
That's
sign
why we have
contracts.
the guide, though. The guide
Right.
spells it out. And all I would say to a person that I don't know is, hey, by law, I have to give you a copy of this guide, a link or whatever, but I have to just go through it with you before I can get into, yeah. So the guide does explain it.
So does TRESA now, so I haven't, since I've joined EXP, I haven't done a deal with another EXP agent. If I do, am I considered multiple representation because they're from the young office as well?
Nope. That's the difference between agency and designated agency. So the listing, say it's my listing. Yes, we both work for EXP, but I'm designated as the agent on this listing. You have a buyer. You're designated as the buyer's agent. That's been the problem all along without having designated agency. There are 2,700 approximately agents, EXP agents in Ontario. Does that mean that we all have a multiple representation every time? Until November the 30th at 11:59 p.m., yes. December the 1st, no. Now, this person is responsible for the buyer, this person or these people, but they're designated, they're specified. So if any of these people put an offer in on any of these people, no multiple representation, but that's why these people can't talk to these people about things that should never be discussed between competing brokerages. Okay, good question though. Thank you. I love the beard too.
Wendy, I have you next.
Oh, all right. I was just going to ask Rick quickly. Does that mean within the team we're in multiple representation? Because Jennifer's on all the listings and she's also the buying.
We're getting clarity.
Yeah, that's what I need to get clarity on it, because is Jennifer on because of just the stats? So I need to reach out to the board. We're going to need this for all the team, because if her name is on every listing and on everything, that would determine, yes, it's a multiple representation. There may be a way that we can work around that where she gets added after the fact. That might make a difference. I don't know. Okay. I've got that down as my one question so far that I got to get clarification on.
Love it.
And
Wendy, question.
Yeah, just back on to the subject of open houses. If the fact that there is an open house is a benefit to the seller, but the people that run the open houses that are not the listing agent, we do these open houses to generate buyer leads. So if the only information that we're sharing with the people that come in are basically what's on the listing or what's on the feature sheet, then we should be able to have open discussion with them as long as we've never been part of that listing team. Right?
Well, if they're self-represented, if they choose to be self-represented,
As buyers,
what's that?
the buyers, you mean?
The buyer comes in and they say, no, I don't want to be represented. I don't want to sign a buyer representation agreement or even a limited service agreement. Then we can't do much of anything for them.
But if they are prepared to sign with us, like on the spot, then we can talk freely to them, because even though we're running an open house, it's not our listing. We're not privy to any confidential information between the client, the seller client, and the listing agent.
Okay, unless they put you down as as a designated agent for that listing, which may happen. They may say, well, you're running the open house, because we get into things beyond. Well, we've got a few complications. First is agency in itself. And people have this thought that, oh, well, I didn't sign a contract, so I'm not the agent. No, if you do certain actions, you've created implied agency. Agency is determined by action, by nothing else. So you say, well, I never signed anything and they're not paying me. I'm not their agent. Oh, but you did this, and this. That's agency things. That's how we ended up with buyer agency. Because it would go to court in the 90s and we say, oh, no, we're all sub-agents for the seller. And the judge said, oh, yeah, really? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is your agent in the room? Oh, yeah, Rick was awesome. He took us out. He showed us 25 houses. He arranged our mortgage. He took us for lunch twice. And he even gave us this wonderful parting gift. Sounds like agency to me. Oh, but I didn't sign anything and the seller's paying. Yeah, the seller's paying with whose money? So got to be careful on agency. So if you are designated with the listing and they're willing to sign, then you would have a dual agency. If you're only working for the buyer and it's even one of your listings, but you're not designated on it, you have independent agency. And it's that relationship that's going to get changed and we're going to have to work with. Okay. A little bit. So, yeah.
Okay, Jake, I have you up next.
Jake on iPhone. Jake, you have to unmute.
Yeah. Are you good?
I see two Jakes here.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jake, we'll come back to you. Be safe.
Terrible.
Okay, so Derek, I'm going to jump to you next.
Okay, so I just have a quick, if you have existing listings with or buyer representation, obviously they carry forward under the current rules and regulations.
Yes.
However, if at any time you make an amendment after December 1st, do we now have to move into the new rules and regulations? If that makes sense. So
there's question number 2. I know that your buyer agency contracts will continue. And I believe
unless it expires, then we got to do a whole new thing, right?
Then you're into a new thing. But again, you're signing buyer agency contracts. What really changes is if you had a customer service agreement. That's where you have an issue because as of December 1st, you no longer have a customer service agreement because there is no such thing as a customer.
Right.
Then you would have to approach them and say, listen, things changed last night. And now I need you to read this 11-page, 13-page, whatever, and I need to explain it to you and make sure we're on the same page. And then you're going to have to choose whether we continue on, which means that you're going to be my client, or whether you're completely on your own, which is self-represented. And then know that self-represented means I can't do those things that I've been doing for you as a customer because customers no longer exist. Buyers, they're already chose to work with you. They're already under contract to you. So you would just sign a new BRA.
Right. But
and I don't know what differences the new BRA are going to have. There'll be a few, like who's designated, which right now the brokerage is designated. Everybody's designated. It will be that Derek is now designated with this buyer.
Right. And that's where I'm sort of concerned. So that, the practice of I have a listing, okay, we're going to do a price decrease or price correction, then you either do an amendment, but as we know, a lot of people will terminate the listing and then relist it. Well, if you now relist it, you have to do the new contracts. You have to explain the new marketing programs. You'd have to document all this information differently. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And just a quick thought point on that for all of you that are canceling and relisting, canceling and relisting and canceling and relisting. that's a professional standards violation under the board. So don't get caught on that, which I mean by saying that is don't do that all the time. Like, don't make that a habit. We had people that would love to do it every 2 days. Just cancel, relist, make a minor change, like instead of saying 30 days, put a date in or whatever, just to rerun the listing. If somebody complains, that is a professional standards violation. You can get fined hundreds of dollars for doing it. So it's just a word of warning.
Well, thank you very much.
We were not doing them every 2 days to our poor listing team.
No, I know, but yeah, just saying, some people will. Some
Hey,
people
always loopholes. I
Yep.
see Jake is back on the call. Are you safe, Jake? Can you unmute?
Can you hear me this time?
We
we
can
are,
hear you
yes.
this time.
Okay,
We can
perfect.
even see you.
Okay, so there you go. So I had 2 quick questions.
Okay.
One would be, can you just clarify for public information? So I can something attached to the thing that's not necessary.
Well, and that's going to be kind of interesting, because can the public actually see that? Is it in the public remarks? And again, Sarah asked me another question that leads right into this is, okay, for websites where we're setting up searches for people, as long as you're using the client information and not the brokerage full, then anything that can be seen on that's public. When they want to know extra stuff, just like say sold prices, we couldn't just set them up on a sold thing. We can't now. So anything that would be public, and if you're not sure, I would have the seller say, what can I disclose in your best interest and what can't I? That would be my question there. Okay.
Like a lot of,
The
there's
roof's
a lot
10
of
years.
teams in the air.
What's that? You're breaking up a
In
bit.
and out a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can right now.
Am I back yet?
Yep.
Okay. So my question was, I know there's a lot of teams in the area that, like, on their own private website, they'll put information on the home, like age of roof, age of windows, stuff like that. Publicly viewed in that.
If the public can see it, it would be public
About-
information. My warning would be, make sure that the seller knows what you're putting on that website. If you're going to say the roof's 25 years old,
Yeah.
did the seller agree to that? I'd want to make sure anything that,
For sure.
that you're putting out there should
Okay.
be. So what I would do would be print off a page, it's a screenshot of that information, and say, seller, is everything here okay and accurate to divulge to the public? Please sign on the corner so that I got a copy that, yeah, you okayed that information. I would want something. But if it's in your client's best interest, absolutely, no problem. You had another question?
Awesome.
I think that was
I
a
have
two-parter
one
there.
more quick one.
Oh, go ahead, Jake.
We lost you again, Jake. If the question was, what's my favorite drink, it's single malt scotch, okay? Just saying.
We're going to be sending Rick a lot of that over December to make
I'm
up for all of
kidding.
our
I got
questions.
enough single malt scotch here in my cabinet to last me the rest of my life, believe it. Anyway, go ahead.
Brad, I have you next.
Hey, Rick. I haven't heard anybody say, so I thought I'd ask, that 11, 13 page guide, is that also going to be available like electronically so we can get a Thenticine?
It will be available electronically. You can send a link, but you still have to explain it. Unlike what half of us do now, where we send them an offer and say, just click, 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 click. You're going to have to say, yes, I explained that to them. So
I get
I can tell you just offhand on an arbitration that I was on, and we won. And the reason we won is because the buyer agent sent all of the documentation, including the buyer agency agreement, in one email, said that they had explained it, but when we looked at the timestamps, the buyer received it at 6:10. They had signed everything by 6:22, and we said, how much did you explain about the contract and about? So even there as a thing, send stuff separately. listen, I'm sending you this guide, and then make sure you go over it with them. Any questions you've got, okay, just to highlight the main points, we're good. Okay, now I'll have you sign that. So it won't be just, hey, I sent you a guide, send it when you sign it when you got a minute. There's more onus than that we have to make sure they understand it. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so back to the beat a dead horse here. If I'm doing an open house and it's Jen's open house and I'm not on the designated squad, I'm just trying to like the mechanics of this. Like I've got sign-in sheets still and a stack of these 11, 12 page things all on the table here. Like you're gonna sign this thing and then sign the other thing and then
depends on what they want to know. If they're just there to see the house, but if they say, okay, well, this seems a little overpriced to me. Have you got any comparables? I can provide comparables to you. However,
and here's the pamphlet. Yeah.
We have to go through this. If they're just there to see the house, they come in, they go out, no issue. You're a doorman.
or self-designated.
But the second they rely on your opinion or expertise, you can't.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Sarah, just going to read Jake and Bake. He just texted me and asked me if I'd ask this question for him. Jake's asking about online sync. If we have someone asking a question about the home, just a generalized question from online, can we answer that, or is that implied agency as well? And then we have to go through the 11-page document thing again.
Is it public information?
No.
Then you need to go through the thing. If they say, I don't want to sign, I don't want to. I mean, the big upside for this is people are going to have to sign BRAs. Because if the agents are abiding by the law, they can't just willy-nilly go out showing everybody else's listings and not, and answering questions and giving opinions. They're going to have to hire an agent. So there's a huge upside to this for us. For those people that, and you'll get people who are saying, I don't want to sign a contract. Okay. They're going to get tired of finding all the agents going, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Sorry, I can't help you. Oh, well, you can go to your lawyer. But the lawyer can't do a CMA. They don't have access to the MLS. So it's a huge, huge boost for great agents. Now, if you're shady and you're going to run into trouble. But for good, honest agents that want to operate and be professional, this is awesome. It's way overdue.
Yeah, so ISA can say anything as long as it's public information, right? I mean, they don't need to worry about that. Yeah.
Now, kind of a clarification on that, Rick. So when people are registering, these are people registering on our online lead sites, right? So they have that automatic search that's set up. It's client MLS, it's public information, but we call them to get information about their search. Like, hey, notice you registered on our website. What's your timeline? What are you looking for? Can we do that, or do we have to do the RICO form first?
I would say you need to do the RICO form before you get too much into that. Because let's face it, what are the conversations? Well, what do you think about and we can talk about general things about the market in all the news media, but, well, what do you think of that neighborhood? What do you think about now we're going into opinion and we're going into service. Now, there will be such things called a limited services agreement where they can hire you to do X, Y, and Z and nothing else. But we'll know more on those when we see them. So.
And this wouldn't be necessarily giving advice. It's more we're getting information. This is kind of part of that initial lead capture. So maybe that's something we could run by you with the script to make sure, is there a sweet spot where we're complying without, because if we have to make all 30,000 people sign a document, we'll probably have a very quiet website. So there might be a script in there that we can thread the needle a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, just make sure that you're asking questions and gaining information and you're not giving advice.
Okay, so we can ask them information as long as we're not providing like real estate advice until we have that document signed.
Just be careful on what you're providing, And again, the logistics will become clear. There are a lot of teams that are doing exactly that. So they're going to have to make clarification. They're going to have to say, you can do this, but you can't do that. Right now, they're not. Okay.
Got it. Okay. Deanna, I have you next.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. And I agree with Rick. Like, this is a lot of information to absorb. I do think that like keeping our eye on the prize of like, it's just going to help us get our representation and get serious buyers and eliminate them like going from person to person to person getting advice for free. But saying that, so I have this thing from Rico, this PDF like question and answer, and it was saying, if you have a seller client, you can provide assistance to a self-represented buyer if it's in the best interest of your seller, if it'll help your seller get the highest price and all of that. So just for the team to be mindful of that, if you have a seller and you get a call, you can do things like provide comparables if it helps your seller. I just wanted to clarify that.
And that's where you start getting a gray area. What comparables are you going to provide? Like, let's be honest. If I have to provide 10 comparables, there's probably 30 I could pull. Which 10 do I give them? The highest, the lowest, the middle one? You know, you say, okay, well, those high ones were 6 months. Okay, but they're still comparables, right? They're in the best interest of my seller, right? No, really, I wouldn't be providing comparables unless somebody's willing to do a limited service agreement at the minimum with me. And if they say, well, I want to put an offer in, well, jot your offer down on that napkin and I'll go talk to the seller. And then, and here's where we can get in a switch. So you've got a buyer that's not willing. They want to be self-represented, and they jot down on this napkin that I'll pay $1.2 million and blah, blah, blah. And you go to the seller and say, hey, I have a self-represented buyer that doesn't want to sign a representation. They want to make an offer. You can do a reverse offer. Now, people say, well, what's a reverse offer? That's where the seller makes an offer to the buyer. You're actually directly working for the seller. You do up the offer. It says the seller hereby offers irrevocably until to the buyer. Now, for a lot of people, that's really strange. If you've been in the business for 47 years, we've done that all the time. In fact, there was a market where, you know, you had a buyer, they saw the house twice and there was no offer. You'd phone the buyer's agent and say, hey, listen, if my seller were to send your buyer an offer, would you look at it? You say, well, that's weird. Okay, so I got a property, it's $1 million. And I've had this buyer show up twice, and the buyer's agent's saying, well, yeah, they seem interested. You know, there's some things that, you know, they're not getting off the fence on me. Okay, well, what if I send you an offer? So you send them an offer for $950. And the buyer goes, oh, no, I wouldn't pay $950. Well, what would you pay? Well, we'd do 9.25 and countersign the offer. Now we have an offer going back and forth. Doesn't matter where it started. We now have an offer that we didn't have before. So you could do the same thing here. You would say to the seller, and he's willing to give you your price. He wants a closing here. Now, again, we can't counsel the buyer on whether they should have conditions, anything. Frankly, we should be saying, you should really go talk to your lawyer before you make this offer. We're not even typing it up for the buyer.
You'll have to protect your seller, right? It doesn't protect your seller to hand over some hokey offer with holes all in it.
Well, but as I say, if you do up the offer, and I'm going to advise the, and the brochure will advise them that they should get professional advice. Doesn't necessarily specify, go talk to your lawyer, but God created lawyers for a reason. I have half stake in one. My daughter's a lawyer, so I kind of have the rest of them, though I'm not responsible for. But anyway, so what we want is them to at least, you know, if they're going to want conditions, but they have to tell us. We can't hint to them, oh, are you sure you're okay with financing? You don't need a financing. You just, worked against your seller, possibly. Maybe not, but that's gray area. Whereas if you go to your seller and say, they want to put in an offer that's this, and this, do you want me to type that up? Yes, I'd like you to type that up. Okay, it's the seller going to the buyer. You're working directly for the seller. And then what are you going to do for your seller? You're going to always make it the best offer you can for your seller, right? No. And that really isn't any different in a way. Sorry, yeah, you're breaking up there a little bit. Sorry.
This just all points towards the benefits of buyer agency.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this is awesome for us if we really get, the whole concept. Instead of having buyers just, go from open house to open house, pick everybody's brain, and then they go with the guy that's going to give them a kickback of cash kickback of, $5,000 or some stupid thing. No. You want me, you want my expertise, you're going to pay for it now.
Awesome.
Anyway, any other questions? I see hands up.
I see a few hands. Anna, hit us. You're muted, Anna.
Muted, Anna.
Sorry, number one, I have two questions. Number one, speaking about instructions from the seller, he says like, I don't want you to disclose this. I want you to only to disclose that. However, what about leaking basement or suicide or homicide or anything else that happened in the house and they don't want to disclose it? Aren't we responsible later? Because buyer agent may not know that.
You are diving into a very, very complicated question, and TRESA directly involves itself with that. Because up until now, if there was something that could be deemed not pertinent to the safety of the house, then like a death, suicide, whatever, you didn't have to disclose that. If the seller said don't disclose that, you couldn't disclose that. TRESA overrides caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, which is the first piece of legislation I've ever seen that does this, because not only does it say that you as an agent, if you know or should have known, must disclose it, it also says that the seller has to disclose it. So
right.
Here's a situation. Does anybody do pre-inspection reports?
We do sometimes. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to advise you not to. Now, not everybody agrees with me on this. In fact, we had a managing broker and some, no. But here's the challenge. If that report reveals anything that the seller may not have been aware of, even if it's not a true situation. Okay, I'll use a really outlandish example here. So we hire a home inspector to come do a pre-inspection. And they're there. There's really nobody else in the house. The kids are at school and, they're kind of on their own and they've got great hearing. And that home inspector hears what he thinks sounds like water running. And he puts his head down on the foundation of the floor of the basement and hears water running. Could report that you may have an underground stream running under the house. This happens. Okay. But once the seller knows that, which they never knew before, you've just created a latent defect. Now, let's say that we didn't do that pre-inspection and the buyers do their own home inspection, which is their due diligence. Up until now, caveat emptor consists of two things. They either do their own due diligence or they have an express warranty by the seller that says that is not the case. Other than that, the seller's off the hook until TRESA. Now, if they happen to know anything or should, they have to disclose that. So, okay, so now we have the buyer. They go and do their own home inspection. Their home inspector is half deaf like me. I need hearing aids most of the time. So I'm not going to hear water running under there. And there's 5 kids running around upstairs. I can't hear anything. And I don't hear that potential underground stream under the foundation. I say everything's fine. The buyer buys the house. And you say, well, that's not fair. Well, the buyer also has home insurance. And if the basement floor collapses 10 years from now because of that underground stream, the home inspection, the home insurance would cover that. Doesn't if it's a pre-existing condition. You nullify, you have to disclose that now. So the only way you should be doing a pre-inspection, and this is right from a lawyer, okay, who is also a real estate agent. If you don't follow Brian Madigan, you should. His answer is this: have your client's lawyer order the home inspection to them. So they get the home inspection, they read the home inspection and make sure that it is safe for their seller to know what's in it before they disclose it. And if they see something there that the seller really might not want to know about, they have client privilege with the seller to, how is the home inspection? You don't want to know. Then the seller doesn't know, then they don't have to disclose. So up until now, we had a gray area. We don't anymore. And there's a court case going on right now where one of the superstar basketball players went and bought a house for millions. And it turns out it was a drug kingpin's house. Okay. The basketball player, and I don't follow basketball, but he is suing to reverse the deal because he's got people showing up at 6 o'clock in the morning looking for their drugs. Okay, because this drug kingpin got put in prison, they're coming back looking for their drugs and their money. So he's got organized criminals coming to his house. They're coming after him because you own that house that you bought from that guy that owes me all this money. Well, that normally wasn't covered under latent defects, but there's a court case going on about it right now. It'd be interesting to see what the end result of that was.
The second question, is there any website or anything that I could start sharing with my client or potential client or future client, because we're coming to 2024 and they will become clients soon, that they can read it and get, acquainted and at least familiarize themselves with that information?
The only thing I'm aware of is Rico's 4 videos that are on and any other recordings that have been done since. That will probably be something that Rico will then set up, or Aria will set up, will be for, like, if you go to rico.on.ca right now, it says, are you a member of the public or are you a real estate agent? They'll put something there so that you'll be able to send your buyers there or your clients there that will explain all of this in advance. I'm sure they'll be on that. Okay.
Hopefully before December 1st.
Hopefully.
Shauna, you have a question.
Yeah, if we can backpedal this a bit, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So back to, we're the listing agent and we have a self-represented buyer who wants us to write up the offer. Okay, so how are we going to know if they've been pre-approved, if they have the finances, if they want to go in firm without any conditions? How is that for the benefit of our seller if we can't do the proper due diligence on the buyer?
Well, and this is where you'll go to your seller, say, we have this buyer, we at this point don't really know much about them, they want to put in this offer. Do you want me to type up an offer? Part of that offer back from the seller might be that the seller requires this documentation as part of the agreement. You're going to do whatever it does to protect your seller, and you'll make it conditional on your seller being satisfied of their ability to finance. So there's all sorts of things that we're going to have to play with.
It sounds like two very important things in there will be a high deposit, because what if they can't close, right?
But that's always important.
Right. And also buyer and seller solicitor review for any self-represented buyer offer.
Honestly, anytime I've even done a multiple representation or a client service, I've always had, and honestly, what I do, and now it's going to be a little different now because I can't do it for the buyer. I'm going to have to do it from the seller. But I've always made it that the agreement that I put in a clause that the buyer recognizes that the listing brokerage works on behalf of the seller, and they have been advised to seek independent legal counsel. The next clause is, this agreement is conditional upon the buyer getting independent legal counsel, blah, blah, blah. Now, if they want to stroke that out, that's on them. I'm going to have them sign a 127 at that point too, like the buyer's acknowledgement that they're not putting these conditions in. But I'm going to make sure to cover my backside by saying, no, I told them. See this? No, I told them. So, but I need
doesn't that form essentially give them advice as to why they're not putting in conditions, right?
No, it basically says we've chosen not to do so. But I need that coming from my seller client now. I need my seller client. I need to point out, well, okay, they haven't mentioned a financing condition. That as your agent makes me nervous. We really need proof that they can finance this. So should I put a clause in our offer that gives that proof? Should I, whatever else? If in doubt, though, send it to lawyers. That's why God created them. Other than being the butt of lawyer jokes, and because my daughter's a lawyer, I can't tell a lot of those anymore. But other than that, I mean, what good are they?
So just to get clarification on that, Rick, when you're saying that you'd have the condition kind of coming from a seller. So if I'm a listing agent, SRP buyer wants to put something in on my listing, maybe the condition is that the seller is satisfied with the buyer's financing?
I would.
Okay.
At this point, I'm going to want evidence. The seller requires these things. And it may be, I need to talk to your bank directly or your mortgage broker.
Okay, because we can't guide them through a fulfillment, right? Like if we put it in favor of the buyer, that's not necessarily our seller's best interest. And how do they sign a fulfillment if we can't tell them what to do?
Well, and we've always had certain things like, okay, if I'm working for a seller and somebody brings in a buyer with a clause of home inspection to the buyer's sole and absolute discretion. I wish we would quit that. There's no such thing. But so they come in saying sole and absolute discretion. I could turn around and say, but for the seller's best interest, we want to see a copy of the report. And we want the opportunity to remedy any issues to firm the deal. Now, a buyer agent isn't going to come in with that because it's not in their client's interest. A seller agent should always insist on that because it's in their client's best interest. We have to look, who are we working for? And then go from there. So, you want a home inspection? Okay, I'm going to write it up because I'm now creating this offer from my seller to the buyer. I'm automatically going to insert the clause that favors my seller, that they can remedy the situation. And I'm going to ask for a copy of the report. Well, I might not. Depends on the situation, because if I ask for a copy of the report, it could give me knowledge. I might ask that it be sent to my lawyer. Again, keeping that buffer between the lawyer and their client, the seller. So that's agency's a funny thing. Siobhan had her hand up for a while, though.
Hi, Rick. I was just going to ask you that question about privacy, because if we are going to ask the buyer to demonstrate proof of their ability to close on the deal, does that mean now that the seller and me, the listing agent, is now privy to that buyer's personal financial information?
Yep.
Are we crossing a line? Is that?
Nope. It's up to the buyer to decide whether or not they're going to give it. If they accept the agreement, they accept that they're going to have to give up private information. If they don't want to do that, they can just say, I'm not taking this offer. Okay, have a nice day. Have a nice life.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick. I think it's clause 25 actually in the offer already says that about consumer report, which the buyer allows them. Maybe we should just show them this is the form of the offer. Look through the clauses if you have any questions, right? And because there is already a clause about consumer report that the buyer allows.
Suggest them any offer that they take it to a professional lawyer and have it reviewed. If they just choose to go off on their own and they go ahead and sign it, as long as they're over the age of 18 and sober, done. Now, people don't understand that, oh, well, gee, we thought we could sell our house and we haven't been able to. We want our money back. No, not happening. So, you've got to look, they have to understand, and hopefully this brochure, and I have not been through the final edit, is going to stipulate to them that this is serious stuff. if you're going to be self-represented, are you prepared to do this, and this? Because you sign a contract, it's a legal action. So if they choose not to give us the required information that we require to sell them the house, that's up to them. You know, they get a choice here. They can say yes, they can say no. If they're not comfortable with it. We get that all the time. There's always that choice. You know?
That actually increases the value of the agents, especially knowledgeable agents as of now.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, TRESA is great for us, but we have to understand it. We have to make sure that honestly, I can see a lot of really bad agents getting the heck out of the business, and I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be happier. Yeah. Wendy's got another question there. I can't see everybody though. I don't know.
Just on that subject. So is this not likely to increase the number of failed deals if these unrepresented buyers, because they have no knowledge, but they think they do, are either accepting an offer that comes from the seller side or putting in an offer that has no protection to them whatsoever? Like, even if they put down a deposit, most sellers, they want to sell now. They don't want to, even if they're going to get 60,000, 100,000 deposit that they get to keep, it's going to be tied up in court and a real mess.
Yeah. Oh, I expect a complete and utter disaster for a while here. I mean, I'm you know, and that's optimistic. But, you know, as I say, we will adapt. Buyers will realize that, and as I say, when you go through this brochure, as I read it the first time through, which was, you know, a couple of weeks ago, and it's changing, like they are refining it. But it basically says, if you are self-represented, this is what you're looking at. So are you really prepared to be self-representative, or do you want to get professional advice? And it leans to, maybe you should hire a real estate agent, maybe, kind of, sure, because most people can't do this.
Is TRESA doing anything other than expecting us to pass out this information? Like, are they going to do any ads on the TV or anything?
I have no idea. No, I would think so. And they better, but that's up to them. I'm not in control. As I say, that they're finally getting their stuff together 2 days before this comes into play. It'll be a while. They're way behind. I don't know why they didn't kick it to January the 1st, but they don't. And they're very clear on it. There is no extension on this. There's no grace period. There's no extension. Here it comes. Okay. It'll be a little bit of a rough ride for a while, and we're going to have to figure these things out. But the beauty that we have, as I said earlier, is we've got 9 management team with about 250 years experience in running all this stuff. We've been through it. I've been through REBA 2002. I was through the law before that. In fact, my daughter used to do real estate law. My wife runs a real estate law company. So, you know, we have great insight into these things, and we will make it work. And then we'll say, hey, found a way to make this work. Here it is. So be tied in, though. Don't just be out there on your own and ignoring and saying, okay, well, I'll figure it out eventually. No, we have to figure it out day one, which is why I'm here. So, and we will be here. Know that we have call managers every single weekend. For those that haven't caught on to that, we have on-call managers. There's 2 of us on call every weekend, including long weekends. The expert care desk, the call-in number, is now live 24/7, 365. So think of the expert concierge care desk, whatever we're calling it, as level 1 tech. Can't get my computer to do something, so you phone the number and they say, okay, well, we're technology, and they give you, okay, try this, try that, try this, try that. Okay, this isn't working. I'm going to have to escalate this to a level 2 tech. Now you're talking to their supervisor. So call the expert concierge. They're trained to answer a lot of your random questions. But when they say, we can't, we're going to have to get a managing broker, then we always have somebody available. On Friday afternoon, you should be receiving an email telling you who's on call that weekend. If in doubt, Ontario Workplace chat group on Workplace. Every Friday, we post this weekend's on-call brokers are with our contact information. You don't have to look far. In fact, I take a picture of that. So when someone calls me and I'm having a family dinner, I can say, these are your on-call brokers, click, and I send them the picture. So we're trying to be as accessible as we can, but that's also why we communicate all the time. Even on weekends when we're off, somebody will post something. And if I see it, I'll put my opinion in there. This is the answer. I have to do that with FinTrack anyway. So I don't get a lot of days off.
Shavana, you had another question.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was covered well when I didn't join in earlier, but in terms of explaining that user guide or the information guide, so I heard your recommendation say it would be great if you put it in an email ahead of time and let them know that you'll be calling to discuss it. Is it appropriate to then do a summary of the highlight of the things that we really want to draw their attention to, or is it something that we have to do verbally and then say,
I
and then
would
have
want to do it verbally, even if you put that in the email.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just so we're clear that you've gone through everything, can I just go through the highlights here? We're all good? Okay, super. Listen, I'm going to send that to you electronically to sign. I'd appreciate. Thanks. I want evidence that I did my job.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're explaining it verbally. Sorry, go ahead, Shavana.
So we're not just putting it in an email here, it's just like the highlight, because I mean, how many pages is it? I heard it was really long.
11. I think it'll end up being 11, but it's 11 to 13.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Apparently it's very, very well done. Apparently it's very, very precise. But as I say, once we get doing this, we'll learn better. You know, we should always be doing a buyer representation agreement before taking buyers out to show houses. Do we do it? No. Half the time agents are sending them in with the offer. And that's why I say dangerous, because part of the buyer agency agreement is they should have had time to have independent legal advice before signing that. You didn't give them that. That's how you lose, especially if you're against me, because I'll pull that out.
We hope to never be against you, Rick.
I had this arbitration. I had my one screen above. I had two laptops, one above and one below. And at one point, I mentioned something to the other. I get to ask questions as the manager. I asked the other agent, blah, blah, blah. He said, well, I don't have my argument here right with me. I said, oh, I do. Would you like me to read it to you? And I read it off my lower screen. Did not impress the arbitration panel at all, especially when they first came into the arbitration and basically told the arbitration panel that they were a complete waste of time and that if we wanted our money, we should just go to court and the heck with you guys. Not a good way to start a relationship with somebody who's going to ultimately decide that you give all your money to them. And that's what happened. They were not prepared. They took it very lightly. So again, I want to make sure that I can say, no, they can't say they didn't know what. I sent them this email. I even highlighted, then I read them all the highlighted parts just to make sure. Then I sent them the form to sign electronically, but only then. Whereas if you send them the copy for signature right with the other one and they go ahead and sign it, how do you know they read anything? Yeah.
So the best practice is we're going to have that verbal conversation about the RICO form. We're also having an email going through the highlights of, hey, to make sure you understand these are the key points, and then we're sending it for sign.
Yeah, we could send the link or a copy of the form with the highlights, but I want to phone and say, hey, listen, did you get my email? Good. Have you got 5 minutes? I just want to run through and make sure we're clear on everything. Okay, just, yeah, if we can just go through the highlight, boom, 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 boom. Because let's face it, in every paragraph, there is one sentence that is the essence of the whole paragraph. So take that, break it down and say, what's the one sentence in that? When I did my real estate course 47 years ago, highlighters had just become the thing. They were a brand new thing, highlighters. And yet some of the people didn't get the idea that the highlighter was to highlight the one important sentence in the paragraph. So you'd look at their books and they had every single word highlighted. And you go, really? You don't understand this concept. You want those highlighted things, boom, 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 point form notes, nice and quick. So you should be able to explain that brochure, even though it's 11, 13 pages, in 5 minutes. Answer any questions and say, okay, now I'm going to send you the form for you to sign. You're going to get an electronic signature, or if you've got them and you're in person, you would have them sign right there once they've explained it. I would not send them all the highlights with the form to sign until I've explained it to them. Okay.
We're going to get really good at scripting.
Yes, yes.
Okay. We know we kept you over time today, Rick.
That's okay. I don't mind.
We so appreciate it. And I know you had a few questions that you're going to take to the rest of the managing brokers and get back to us.
We're going to look at.
Cannot express with words how appreciative we are for you giving us your time this afternoon. We had a gazillion questions, obviously, and thank you again for your knowledge and expertise.
Yeah. If you have any other questions that come up, send them to onbroker@exprealty.net. For those that haven't figured out, .coms are agents, .net is staff and management. Okay, just a simple little, because a lot of people say, oh, .net, why? Because I actually have both, but just so you know, anything, if you're sending it to any manager, first name dot last name @exprealty.net, any agent, first name dot last name @exprealty.com. But if you send it to onbroker@exprealty.net, then, and in the subject line, put TRESA question, because we're collecting them all and we're starting a chat between the managers. Hey, got another question. Here's a new one. And then we will be issuing frequently asked questions with the answers, bang, bang, bang. So that then you can actually look them up, and we'll be publishing those on an ongoing basis. So again, if you're not following the Ontario Province Workplace Group, get on it. Make sure your notifications are on, because that's where all the information is going to come. There are 17,000 workplace groups. Yeah, you don't want to follow them all. Follow that one is the most important. I would follow Canada. I would follow your province, and I would follow your local area. And if you do not have a local area one, let us know. We are creating them. That's kind of our next job after TRESA, so that we will have centralized official workplace groups. So you want to post a listing, post it there. You want to look for somebody to do an open house or do an open house, you would post it there. You're going to get together with agents in the area to have lunch, you would post it there. And those groups will have the managing broker that you would normally deal with also in that group, so that they can answer some of your questions. Although you're always better to come workplace chat direct when you need a question. I see people posting random questions on some of the work groups, and you go, why are you putting it there? We don't necessarily see it. So we're working on that for communication. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Rick. I have that email written down, guys. I will make sure to post that as well. We have additional TRESA questions to ask our amazing brokers. And good luck with everything, Rick. I'm sure we'll be in touch with more questions, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm on call for the weekend of December 1st, and I just can't wait.
Thank you.
All right.
Please in Seattle.
I'm doing 2 Santa events that weekend too. It'll be interesting. Santa's going to be pulling out his phone and answering questions. All the best, everyone.
Thank you, Rick.
See you soon.